big question is, did August 1969 change the world? According to David Hepworth, a writer for New Statesman, and the link to this article will appear below, he believes that August 1969 was a critical month. In this video, I'm not going to focus so much on August, but the year that it appeared in. And so, before we go on and examine the astrology associated with 1969, why did David Hepworth pick these items? And let me quickly review them for you. First of all, we had the 3-day Woodstock Music Festival in upstate New York. I think it was even called an Aquarian exposition, relating it in some way or another either to the age of Aquarius or to the zodiacal sign Aquarius in some way. But Woodstock was extremely pivotal in the world. Most people do not yet understand this. This is because when historically we go back and look at the arrival of the Protestants and Puritans, or we look at the arrival of the bourgeoisie, or we look at the arrival of workers wanting to get fair rights for their activity, all these activities appeared over centuries, and people at the beginning of such revolutions do not necessarily recognize the revolution they're in. But nevertheless, the astrology shows what sits behind these revolutions, and the Woodstock Festival is part of a major and significant social revolution that has strong political outcomes. And this revolution sprung out of the 1960s and 70s, and in many ways Woodstock can be considered the initial coming of age, because all of a sudden there was this huge number of people, hundreds of thousands of people flocked to upstate New York for this festival, and Americans and the world took note. Certainly the local authorities took note, because they were almost going to declare a state of emergency. Such was the dire and minimalistic planning that went into this festival. But nevertheless, Woodstock is iconically placed to represent the initial coming of age of the alternative society, the hippies, the new age, whatever you want to call it. And if you examine the kind of changes that have occurred in Western society since that time, you will see that many of their ideals of this new generation of reformers have already started to come to play in the world, especially in Western society. Not that they have transformed the whole world yet, they're just biting around the edges, and that's another whole story, which I will get into at a later time. Everything has two sides in astrology. If there's a positive side to any astrological influence, there will also be a negative side. And the negative side to Woodstock can be represented by Charles Manson and his followers, who murdered Sharon Tate and a number of people in August 1969. And also, we had the Beatles crossing the road in front of the Apple Studios, across the zebra crossing, which became a photograph or graphic on one of their albums, and it kind of iconically represents that era, the 1960s and the 1970s. Now the 1960s and the 1970s in totality, in American urban myth, is called the Age of Aquarius. In American urban myth, the Age of Aquarius lasted 20 years, even though the astrological Age of Aquarius lasts for over 2,000 years, because most people relate those 2 decades to something that was revolutionary, something that was new, something that had some great energy behind it, and they were quite correct. What they're quite incorrect about is thinking that it only lasted 20 years. It's actually going to last centuries. It's going to transform Western society and ultimately worldwide society. And then finally, we have the return to Earth of the Apollo 11 crew. And if you remember, the Apollo 11 mission was the first mission where astronauts actually landed on the moon and got out and had a walk. What I will be discussing in the rest of this video is that these items are not random. They're not just a collection of a mishmash of things, but that they are all archetypally related to the sign Scorpio. Woodstock, because it was really a revolutionary activity. It was part of a revolution, even if people have difficulty understanding that it was a revolution. The Manson murders, well, any murder has to do with Scorpio, so that's straightforward. The return to Earth of the Apollo mission is Scorpio, because outer space is ruled by Scorpio. And of course the Beatles zebra crossing isn't directly related to Scorpio, but it is actually iconically represents the revolutionary New Age movement that came out of the 1960s and 70s. But let's go and examine the astrology that sits below these items. But I will not be focusing on August. I mean, it is probably more accidental, if anything else, that August was the month that David Hepworth picked for demonstrating that this was the month that changed the world. I would say this month was in a small period of time of just slightly over a year that really had the same intent. Welcome to the astrology of 1969. This may all look rather confusing because it has nothing to do with horoscopic astrology. It's got to do with the age of Aquarius and the astrological ages in general. How do we get that August 1969 is special, or what I'm really saying is that basically most of 1969 and early 70. Why was this time special? If we look here, I'm just going to start with the ages. The age of Pisces ran from 732 BC to 1433 AD. This is very confusing to many people, including astrologers. It's like, and they throw their hands up in horror. How can the age of Aquarius arrived in 500 years ago when we're waiting for it now to come and fix up the world? I don't want to pour water on your positive conjectures of what may be associated with Aquarius, but I can tell you that you haven't got anything to stand upon by linking Aquarius with some sort of perfect age. It does not exist, and there is no suggestion that perfection is associated with Aquarius. But that is another story altogether. So what you can say about the 15th century, which 1433 exists in, is historians will tell you is that in Western society marks the end of the Middle Ages or medievalism, and all history books will tell you that early modernity appeared in the 15th century because key and critical things occurred in the 15th century that have produced our world today. Such things as the printing press, the scientific discoveries, the discovery of the Americas, and then the whole world through the circumnavigation by various sailors. It completely transformed the world this century, which is what you expect at the beginning of an age. So in 1433 the Aquarian age arrived, and it goes all the way through to 3574. It's a long age. It's not 20 years like Americans would like to think, that the age of Aquarius lasts 20 years. No, it's actually about 2,100 and so years. So if we just look at the Aquarius age, what we'll do is just look at the beginning of the Aquarian age. And what most people don't realise is if we look at the beginning of the Aquarian age, we are looking at the first 4 or 5 sub-ages that appear at the beginning of the age of Aquarius. You may not realise that ages have sub-ages, but they do. These sub-ages are less than 180 years each, about 178, I think. When we look at the beginning of the age of Aquarius, which was 1433, we start with the Capricorn sub-age, which is 1433 to 1612, followed by the Sagittarius sub-age, which is 1612 to 1791, followed by the Scorpio sub-age, which is 1791 to 1970, followed by the Libra sub-age, which we are currently in, from 1970 to 2148. You will notice that these go backwards through the zodiac, just like their parent age. This is the key sub-age we're really looking at. If we're examining 1969, here it is. You'll notice that the Scorpio sub-age comes to an end in 1970, just a few months later. And this is no coincidence, because I will not get into it in this video, but because ages go backwards and because all the sub-periods within them, such as sub-ages, also go backwards, they're strongest at their end and weakest at their beginning. If I was to show here, for instance, here's the Pisces age, the last sub-age in Pisces, which is not shown here, is actually Pisces. So when the Pisces sub-age comes to an end, it comes to an end with a Pisces sub-age at the end of the Pisces age. And not only that, the last age decan in the Pisces age is the Pisces age decan. So you have the Pisces age ending with the 700 odd years Pisces age decan plus the 178 years Pisces sub-age. So you can see that Pisces is peaking at the end of the Pisces age and is much weaker at its beginning. And the same thing with the age of Aquarius. When we examine the Scorpio sub-age, what I'm proposing is that it is much stronger at 1970 than it was at its beginning in 1791. And if we look at the Scorpio sub-age, and here it is, I have then broken them up into the 12 micro-ages. There's the Scorpio sub-age, 1791 to 1970, as I have shown here, 1791 to 1970. But now I've broken them up into the micro-ages. And again, you will notice that these micro-ages go backwards. It started off with the Libra micro-age, Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, Sagittarius, Scorpio. So here again we see that the last micro-age within the Scorpio sub-age is also the Scorpio sign. It's the Scorpio micro-age. So that tells you just very simply that Scorpio is going to be much stronger in the Scorpio sub-age when it's also in the Scorpio micro-age. If we were going to use sub-age decans, and you can apply decans everywhere in any sign, this decan here, which is basically this whole decan here, from 1910 to 1970, is the Scorpio sub-age decan. So here we are in 1955 to 1970 in the Scorpio micro-age, in the Scorpio sub-age decan, at the end of the Scorpio sub-age. What could we say about this? Obviously, Scorpio is fairly strong. Now, that only takes us from 1955 to 1970, but micro-ages are not the end of the line. Micro-ages, which are about 15 years, can be broken up into 12 nano-ages of about 15 months each. And so I have done this I have taken this almost 15 years Scorpio micro-age, and I have now broken it up for you into its 12 nano-ages with the dates of commencement. So here it is. Whereas I've got the Scorpio micro-age starting in 1955, when you start going down into periods that are 15 months long, it's necessary to introduce months. So here I've said that it's actually in July 1955 commenced that Scorpio micro-age with the Libra nano-age, and it finished not just in 1970 but in May 1970 at the end of the Scorpio nano-age. This is the crux. We've got this from the February 1969, which covers August, to May 1970, at the very, very pinnacle of Scorpio. This kind of strength of Scorpio can only occur once every age. To get another Scorpio period that is strong as February 1969 to May 1970 will take about another 2,000 years because it's only when this occurs at the end of a Scorpio sub-age can the same strength be achieved. This is why this period, February 1969 to May 1970, is so critical in the world. It really does mark the revolutionary change associated with Scorpio. It's also indicating why there was such a focus on space travel in those times, because Scorpio was peaking all through this period to a crescendo. And it is due to this that David Hepworth came up with his article, Did August 1969 Change the World? Because he could see that there was a significant change in the world at that time, and the astrology agrees, because here, which is here, and which is here, is a major fulcrum point in the age of Aquarius.